this is Liz from People I Think Are Cool, a bi-weekly podcast where I interview my favorite creatives from across the globe. If you're looking for a dose of creative inspiration, then go to peopleithinkarecool.com or subscribe to People I Think Are Cool on iTunes and Stitcher.
You like film, from cult to classic, from blockbuster to B-movies. And there just isn't that one place with all the fan fervor and passion that's covering the kind of mad, diverse brilliance that you love.
Well, that's where you're wrong.
AfterMovieDiner.com is that fan-built movie nirvana just for you, featuring the sweet, sweet writings of the wife dork herself. AfterMovieDiner.com. Go there. Be the best you can be.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast, the official podcast of the Alamo Drafthouse, Winchester.
Welcome to another edition of the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Joining me today is Lisa Gullickson, the wife dork.
Ned Ryerson.
Bing! And I am Brad Gullickson, the mouth dork, coming at you from the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester Projection Booth cast.
Ooh. Billy is also with us on this episode. We are re-recording our intro, so you can look forward to that indie goodness coming up.
We have our reasons. But who's joining the Indie Dork in the projection booth today?
Two super cool guests that we've been greatly anticipating, and having to keep the secret to ourselves was just torture. But our guests are the amazing character actor and individual Stephen Tobolowsky, and from Slash Filmcast, David Chen, and director of Primary Instinct.
Yes, and that's why they're here today to talk about that film. It came out a few years ago, I want to say 2015 originally. Now here it is at the Winchester Drafthouse, sold out crowd. How rad is that?
Soups.
And we got the opportunity to talk to them about their film, you know, what inspired them to take their podcast, The Tobolowsky Files, and turn it into a stage production and then film it, and the challenges within that concept. It's a film that Lisa and I really adore. You can rent it right now on iTunes, Amazon, all those places. I'd highly recommend it, although we don't spoil anything within this conversation. One thing does come up about the halfway point.
And Stephen Tobolowsky was acting like it was going to be like a private joke between us dorks. But you know we don't keep any secrets from our fans.
Yes, so we'll explain the thermos reference that occurs halfway through. So once upon a time, I worked at Barnes & Noble, and I was the music manager. And I had several customers who would come to me, and obviously they want recommendations, they want to talk movies, they want to talk TV.
And a lot of older ladies would come in and be sweet on Brad because he was literally a captive audience because he was not allowed to leave the music department.
Right, you're trapped back there. And I had one customer who we shared an affection for Stephen Tobolowsky. And when I left that store, she made me a gift. And because we were both fans of this, actually, a film that precedes the Primary Instinct. It's sort of the beginning of what would become the Primary Instinct. It's called Stephen Tobolowsky's Birthday Party. It's another storytelling type environment in which Tobolowsky deals out several stories, ties them all together in some profound manner. So, as a gift to me, she gave me a thermos that was wrapped in a collage of Stephen Tobolowsky's
Not just like
face.
gave Brad a thermos. She made Brad with her own two hands. She made Brad a thermos.
And here's the deal. Lisa has always disliked this thermos.
It's another lady's thermos.
And I wasn't going to even tell this story to Stephen Tobolowsky, but Lisa forced me to do so upon meeting him.
And guess what? He took my side of the story. He agreed that, thermos is a sacred gift.
You don't sip from another lady's thermos.
No, you do not. It's,
all right.
He knows what is and is not kadosh.
So that's the background on that inside joke when it comes up around the halfway point of this conversation. Also, Dave Chen does not start the interview with us. He comes in at about the halfway point. Originally, we were going to do 2 separate interviews.
But honestly, I think that this worked out way better.
I love it. I love recording in the projection booth. I love that Andy, sends up drinks for everybody, a little hot water for Dave Chen.
That's
a
all
little
he drank.
Vienna lager for me. So we're going to give you the entire interview in one chunk and just not worry about editing and just let you be a fly on the wall in the projection booth.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
Yeah, so without any further ado, here's Billy the Indie Dork, Stephen Tobolowsky, and David Chen, and Lisa and Brad.
Bing!
All right, and we are up in the projection booth at the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester. We have a special guest today, Stephen Tobolowsky. Thank you for joining us so much.
My pleasure of being here in Winchester.
Yes, I mean, it's a real treat for us. We're huge fans. From every character, Ned Ryerson to the butt crack plumber, we are fans.
Yeah, the butt crack plumber was one of my favorite roles. It was, as I recall, the butt crack plumber came along because I had just had a health issue. I believe that was maybe the open heart surgery. I think it was around and then. And, it's very difficult after you have been out because of an injury or some sort of thing to start working again. And I needed money because I hadn't been able to work for many, many months, and the cupboard was bare. And Rob Hedden, lovely Rob Hedden, writer, director, wrote in that role specifically for me to play. I was offended at first that he called it butt crack plumber. I mean, he could have called it just plumber. But I told him my whole deal about how you judge a part as an actor by the name. You remember this thing that I talk about names quite often. And for those of you who don't know, the way it works is really good parts have a first and last name, like Captain Jack Sparrow, Richard Kimball, The Fugitive. If you have a lesser part, you will get one name and your job description. If you get a first name and a job description, you're usually in a comedy, like Sheriff Charlie, Inspector Bill. That means you're in a comedy. If you're in a drama, you will get the job description and a last name. Detective McLaren, Professor Johnson, something like that. Lesser roles than that, you just get the job description. You get security man, which I've played, a homeless man, and the worst is when they give you a number. So I played Homeless Man 2. Actually, I was telling this morning, Rick, earlier, that when you're Homeless Man, who would you expect would have the best part? Homeless Man 1, Homeless Man 2, or Homeless Man 3? What do you think?
Homeless Man 1, right?
Lisa?
I would also say Homeless Man 1.
And you would be so wrong. Homeless Man 1 is your standard homeless guy. Homeless Man 2 is the one that's quirky. He's the one that's offbeat. And Homeless Man 3 is actually a woman. Oh, so you get that female voice, but they're Homeless Man 3. They didn't call it Homeless Woman 1. Homeless Man 3 was a woman who actually, in film lore, the Homeless Man 3, the woman of that film, of the TV show I did, was in Groundhog Day, and she played the woman who got a flat tire, that Bill Murray fixed her flat tire. She was so tired of playing Homeless Man 3, she left Los Angeles and went to Chicago and got the role of Woman with a Flat Tire 2. Woman with a Flat Tire 2.
That's fantastic.
But then you get worse parts than that, getting back onto the naming of characters, and these are, I think we settled on one of the worst is if you get a kind of description of a human being in a geographical location. Old man on a train. My friend Ben Solenberger, who is from Winchester, just got the role of White Guy 3. So that's probably a pretty bad role.
Oh, well, I think the term white guy attached to anything nowadays is not very flattering.
Well, I think if it was White Person 3,
Yeah.
you could assume that it was maybe a drama, a college drama or something, but White Guy 3, you figure it's going to have a little tartness to it.
Well, I don't know if you're aware, but Butt Crack Plumber is now just The Plumber on IMDb.
Actually, when I told this whole thing to Rob, he put a name on my plumber shirt, and he put Dave on my plumber shirt. And in the movie, Kathy Bates answers the door, and she goes, finally, she threw in the line, "Oh, well, Dave, do you want to come inside?" And she threw that line in, and I threw in the line, "Well, actually, my name's not Dave. I just am wearing his shirt."
Because of the understanding of the entire names thing, I directed five Christmas pageants for little kids, and I never gave anybody a number. I gave everyone a name, and I would have to come up with there's 17 penguins or pigeons and whatever.
Did you name each penguin?
And I named each one, and everybody had a name.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just see. What are some of the penguin names?
Okay, well, there is, now it's been a couple of years. Well, there was, of course, the king penguin.
King Penguin, okay.
And then the, Flappy, obviously.
Oh, okay.
Waddles.
So not like Dave or
No,
Bob.
they didn't get people names. No, they got penguin names. They got penguin names, but yes, every single one of them got a name.
Was there any competition amongst the children for who should be allowed to get? Was there a cool name?
Well, really what it came down to is some kids got 3 lines, some kids got 2 lines, and some kids got 1.
But I got to tell you, hearing the penguin story now, it just about brought a little tear to my eye of thinking of a teacher that would care that much about her students and having a good experience. I'm tearing up now. Having a good experience playing the penguins, to not feel that they were second, third, fourth, and 17th of 17 penguins?
Yeah.
17th class citizens, that they would all have a name.
Well, in The Prodigal Son, I was the floozy number 3, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And it was, floozy number 1 was the number 1 floozy.
She was the best floozy?
She was the best floozy.
How old were you when you did a floozy?
I will tell you, 13 years old. Floozy number 3.
That's so inappropriate.
My friend Laura, who was 12, did not get to be a floozy.
My son did, my cousin, my sister, what is that play from my cousin Rachel, my sister Rachel?
I don't know.
My cousin...
Eileen.
Yeah,
my sister Eileen, my cousin Eileen. It's something like that. And he did that in 8th grade, and the girls at school, it was a school play, the girls played prostitutes. Because the apartment house where they live in New York is also, the girls are turning tricks. So little Esther Rosenberg was playing, hooker number 1.
Yep.
This is so inappropriate. This is so terrible. But yeah, what can you do with modern education?
Somebody's got to be the floozy in the parable.
Do you know, I did theater I did theater when I was in high school, and we took a play through the competition circuit, and my role in the play was very small, but it was effectively Rapist number 2, which is a crazy, insane thing to put in a high school. I don't remember the name of the play, and that I wish that I had the knowledge of it, because it was wild. But what a strange role to ask a 17-year-old to play.
Yeah.
So we do this competition, and the scene is very small, but it's like a moment that impacts the main character, right? Obviously, how could it not? So it's important to the story, but we go in and then we're done. We're done with the play. That was my entire role for the competition. They grade you at the end, and you're evaluated by the judges. And I had this insane moment of being on stage at a competition where a judge in the evaluative process called out myself and my Rapist number 1 compatriot, and this is a compliment I'll never forget. You did such an amazing job playing this rapist. How did you put yourself in the mindset to do this? I was 17. I did not have an answer for that question.
I bet you that the person who was judging was 22 years old.
I don't know, but it's gotta be that.
Word.
Okay, let's get this back on track.
But
you go ahead.
well, on running off of that point, as a character actor primarily, you have to bring so much to your roles. But why is it important that it's not, you don't think of it as just butt crack plumber or penguin number 17?
Well, the only thing you could play if you're a main character or a character actor is what you know. That's all you could play. You can't play something that is in fantasy world that doesn't exist. For example, take like I'm on One Day at a Time now, which is a spectacular show. And in one episode, I had 2 daughters that wouldn't talk to me. And then in another show, I had 1 daughter that wouldn't talk to me. And I was trying to ask the writers, saying, do I have 1 or 2 daughters? And I think it still hasn't been really clarified in any story way as to how many daughters. And they asked me, well, what difference does it make? And I said, if you were a parent, you would know the difference between having 1 child and 2. When you have 1 child, you put all your hopes, all your dreams, all your worries, all your aspirations into that 1 child. There's even, when you read the baby books, there's even some Latin word for what the first child is, because it's the child that gets the burden. Throughout history, in Catholicism and Judaism, the first child was the one that was tithed to the church. It's like having 1 child is a big deal. And to have that 1 child turn your back on you is another. You have 2 children. That second child could be the rebel. You could have had a history of that child always turning their back on you. And by the time you have a second child, you're so tired, you don't care that much. So it matters specifically what your investment is emotionally in the child. And if you don't know that, you can't play that. I remember I had an acting teacher, brilliant man, Ed K. Martin, and I was sassy to him. I was in graduate school. And he says, I feel like you don't know who you are on stage. And we were doing The Country Wife, which was a restoration play. No one could understand a word we were saying anyway. Oh, megads, how are your sparks? Begin. You know, all this kind of, been to the alehouse, my lord. You know, all this kind of stuff. And the audience loved me. You know, I did all these cheap jokes all the time and was just cutting a rug, and everybody loved me. Everyone screamed for me a curtain call. And so I wasn't prone to listen to my teacher who said, I didn't like you at all. I thought you had no idea who you were. Who are you in this play? And I said, I'm the lead, Horner's friend. I'm his best friend. He goes, what does that mean? I said, do you know what a friend is? He says, I may know what a friend is. Do you know what a friend is? What does being a friend mean in this case? What do you do? And is the friendship equal, coming and going? Are there some things he does that hurt your feelings? What is it you want from him in this friendship? What does he want from you, if anything, in this friendship? And I'm just thinking, like, this is so much chatter from my teacher. But now I realize he was telling me the absolute truth. In answer to your question, you cannot play any part, any acting is not about feelings. It's about thought, clarity of thought. And unless if your thoughts are clear, your emotions will be 100% correct. So you need to do research like a detective to know who your character is, so you know what you're playing. And then it all becomes easy. You could be a butt crack plumber, you know. You could do that.
One of the things that, as a listener of the Tobolowsky Files and listening to your stories and stuff like that, I always think that you're a person who just in your acting, but also in your life, acts with a tremendous amount of clarity. And I think that, we see that in the way you approach a character, going like, okay, well, I have to have all of the knowledge surrounding, and then going back to like the fact that you've had some, what is it called when you read other people's thoughts and things like that?
Like intuition.
And
psychic.
Psychic connections. Do you think that the way that you have learned to approach your acting has also informed the way you have lived your life in a way?
I totally think so. There was something Stanislavski said in one of his books, which, of course, again, when I read it as a student, I had no idea what he was talking about. And he said, all life comes from the eyes of your partner on stage. All life comes from the eyes of your partner on stage. And I'm thinking like, okay, this is some kind of touchy-feely stuff. I was reading this in the 60s anyway. I don't care. I don't know what this means. But now I understand what he means. And it's so true. Looking in your eyes now, I'm not going to make you any kind of a thermos. But this is a private joke, not for consumption. But you read a million bits of information when you look at someone's eyes. Like a lot of times on One Day at a Time, I get to play opposite Rita Moreno. Well, she's my love interest on the show. And in every take we do it, Rita is 100% alive and 100% present, but every time her eyes are different. And sometimes her eyes will be welcoming, sometimes her eyes will be scolding, sometimes in the same scene. And her eyes will inform me what my next moment has to be. So as an actor, it's like pitching in baseball. You have to know the mechanics, but then you just have to throw the damn ball. And you have to not worry about all the people screaming at you. You have to throw the ball, you have to see your target and throw. And so acting is very much the same. Like you say, it is a gestalt. It's a whole thing. You could do all of your research and all of your knowledge, but none of that matters if you don't look into the eyes of your partner in a scene and get something from them and understand what scene you're with. A lot of times I act with people and they don't. They just do the same thing each time and it'll come off wooden. That's something Bill Murray does. Not wooden, the opposite. Bill Murray is in your eyes every second. And every moment, every take is completely different because he is riding you. I'm again using a bad metaphor. He's playing off of you as if it were a roller coaster. Each scene is like every second he's with you. And so yes, you have to study your part, but then you have to let it go and play off of the eyes psychically of your partner to know where you're at.
But also that, like, with what has happened in your life, and is that also how you live, like really engaging with other people and engaging with this situation, so that when these special moments happen that become your story, you're just hyper aware of the sacredness of that moment? Yeah,
it's everything you said is true, and it's also a reason why I quit playing certain parts, because you can't really turn it off. Whatever you do as an actor or as a writer, you can't turn it off. So I remember there was one part Brian De Palma wanted me to come in and read for of a guy who was a child molester and murderer, and he was like the bad guy of the movie, and they used the murders as sort of like the dramatic element of the film, just like tap dancing in 42nd Street. And I'm going like, I can't, that was the one that crossed the line, and I go like, I can't do this. I can't do this, and I can't go to that place. And I think it was Ray Fiennes. I think when wasn't he the bad guy in Schindler's List?
Oh yes.
He said he's never doing that again.
Yeah, I can see why.
He said that it changed his life. He said that he changed his life. David Chen, ladies and gentlemen, David Chen.
There he is.
David Chen has just entered the room.
Yeah, please sit.
Come on, join on in.
My dear compatriot
We hadn't started
from Seattle.
talking ill of you, unfortunately. We'll have to get that at another
He
time.
never explained he was filming this.
No, I'm honored to be a part of it.
Yes,
He told me he was.
the one and only DC.
Nice.
When did you get in?
Like literally 20 minutes ago.
Oh man, it's good to see you. It's good to see
Straight
you.
to
Let me
business.
confirm this table. Drinks needed,
I mean,
food needed,
I always will take a beer.
beer,
I'll have a glass of water.
glass of water.
I will also have a glass of water.
Glass of
Could I
water.
get a cup of hot water?
Hot water, yes. Bill, you're good?
I'm good.
I'm assuming by beer you mean anything I
Whatever you want to bring me, I'll
I
drink
know what they
it.
need to sell. I'll bring
You
it
guys
right
cool
up.
if I'm filming
I
something?
please.
100%.
man.
I 100%.
Yeah, go for it.
It's actually a kind of a great moment for you to come in, because talking about stories and being in the moment with stories, and then coming now to wanting to make the primary instinct.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys were doing the Tobolowsky files before that. Why say let's record a live audience
I think this is David Chen speaking, by the way. I think the reason was because Stephen is a very physical performer. Anyone who's seen him naked on Californication can attest to this. And so there's just a lot that's lost when it's just a audio performance, you know. And so I wanted a way for people to experience the full Stephen, as I call it, in bed.
Well, you know, we're all massive Film cast listeners.
Awesome.
And I was listening to your Mandy review earlier, and you were talking about how some films they can only be visual. And you were a little self-deprecating about the fact that, well, I made a movie that could have been a podcast. Yeah. And I was thinking, really, no, because of just what you said, the primary instinct had to be a visual thing as well.
I was being a little self-deprecating. Yeah. You don't know about this.
Oh, good.
I was self-deprecating us.
That's good.
Your will.
That's good.
But yeah, I think there's something to it. And also, like, people are more willing. In my opinion, there's a different set of people willing to watch something than willing to listen to something.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think there's a different buy-in. There's a different agreement between the performer and audience when you're listening to something. Like, I always talk to people who are listening to the podcast now while they're driving, you know, which sounds completely unsafe to me. So anyway, but they're obviously busy doing something, and it's not a solitary event. They're listening to the podcast while they're, you know, navigating the 405. When you go into a theater, it is sensory deprivation. They lowered the lights in the audience to take away that. They raise lights on stage to say, this is where you're going to watch, and this is what you're going to listen to. And David even makes announcements to put away your cell phones, which they often don't do.
They've mastered that here.
But it is saying, this is what we're watching. Again, going back to Stanislavski, the same book where he said all life comes from the eyes of the person you're playing with on stage. He said the act of theater, the artistic moment of theater, is in a fire that exists between actor and audience. Now, that is also kind of woo-wooism too, but that doesn't happen with a podcast. With a podcast, people are listening, and usually at work or someplace where they're trying to escape something, driving, where they're trying to make the trip last, and thank God for that. I mean, I just got something from England, an email, I'll send it to you, of somebody who just discovered the Tobolowsky Files podcast, and they were doing their trip around England, Scotland and all over, and they started at episode 1, and they got to like episode 14 or so, going around the trip. They said, oh my God, we love this. So yeah, but they loved it in a car, traveling, stopping at Stonehenge or whatever, and doing something else in between, rather than saying, this is a concentrated image we want to give you, and it's on stage under the lights, and it's me and you, and whatever happens, happens. There's no David Chen there rescuing us sometimes if we need editing.
Yes, editing is very important. But to finally make that decision of pulling the trigger on making that film, that the amount of prep you had to do for that presentation had to have been unreal.
Did you take that on the road at all before you filmed the event?
We did do a small Boston show as kind of a trial run. Yeah.
We did it, the exact same story pretty much, in a coffee house in Seattle as well, where I was just sitting at a table with people instead of performing and just saying the story. And I spent probably a year walking around my neighborhood, working on this story kind of in my head. And then David announced that he wanted to do this, we had about 5 months, 6 months?
Wow, okay.
Something like that, and that's all his prep, and I'm like working on this as maybe a live story. David had the idea.
Yeah, but I think it's very difficult to perform a 70-minute show from memory and make it feel like it's not from memory, you know?
And it wasn't a 70-minute show.
Oh yeah, it was long.
How long was that show?
It was actually like an hour and 45.
Oh wow.
45 minutes, yeah.
There's a whole other story.
There's a whole other story that we filmed. And originally it was just going to be like we're presenting these two stories like back to back, and he was going to replicate the experience of seeing Stephen live. But when we got into the edit and I showed people the movie, there was one director, let's just say, very talented director who I'm not gonna like name drop, but he's been on the podcast before.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I remember the notes he gave me on the movie. He said, "Hey, so I watched the movie with The Primary Instinct with my wife last night, and the first 70 minutes of it was incredible. Like we laughed, we cried, we held each other. Me and my wife held each other. It was very, very moving. And then the second part of it took a complete thought and made it incomplete. You know, it was very un-Tobo-like, was what this person said. And then so
Glad you didn't tell me that.
And,
Until this very moment.
And so then we kind of like played with the idea of like getting rid of the second part of the story and just having it be this very compact, tightly constructed single story.
And I felt the same thing. I watched it at home, and I watched it with my wife Ann. And we watched it, and she said, "I think you ought to stop it after the first story." She said the first story is so good and so powerful, it kind of drains you. And then coming back to another story, you almost have to start with an act one again.
Yeah.
And you have to rev up again, and it's hard to get through that first story because you're laughing and crying and all this stuff. I did something last week in Dallas. I did The Alchemist. And at the end of that story...
It's a great story that Stephen tells. Yeah.
At the end of that story, the people were just weeping in the audience. And I was thinking like that I would do this story and then another short story afterwards from Adventures with God. Alchemist is in Dangerous Animals Club. And I made the call going like nope, we're ending it here. We're ending it here. And people can't rev up anymore. There's just so many act ones they can.
And you want to leave them wanting more, which I believe is the showbiz adage.
I got it.
It's like, I think like one of the, somebody said the first rule of show business is get off the stage.
Right.
And the second rule of show business is do another 20 minutes.
Let's see, water here.
Water.
So he is the hot water.
He's hot water. I'm beer.
Hot water for you. Cold water for you.
Beer for me.
Beer down
Thank
here.
you so
I don't
much.
know, what was the decision page on the beer?
The Vienna Lager.
Vienna Lager. I love
The
the Vienna
classic
Lager.
fave.
Yes,
And
devil's
then some lemon
backbone.
for everyone, whoever needs it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, Paige.
Alamo Winchester always brings lemons.
They do. Now, so you do you do The Primary Instinct, and then Dave goes off and makes a film out of it. Do you step back and just let him?
He let me see.
I thought it was pretty collaborative.
He let me see a couple edits, and of course I had no idea what he would do as a director, because I think we only did the short piece of the getting held hostage at gunpoint and a few short pieces at Cornish. Right, we did a few short pieces, but I didn't know how he would edit the movie. So, some of my notes were really picky, like, oh, I think I saw a jump cut here, or I think this is, like. But then after a couple passes with me, he just took it and he worked on it all. A lot of work.
And then you have what was the decision to do the bookends? To set the stage for the performance.
I think there was this idea, like, I had this notion that like this may be the only time I ever get to make a film with Stephen, and if there's one thing that's going to represent Stephen and like how I perceive him and my relationship with him and his abilities and his talents to weave a story. I wanted to like just get it all in there, you know, like, and I feel like those bookends, like the interviews, help to explain who this person is and give you a sense of his long and storied career. Of course, like his career like took off, you know,
so, yeah.
exponentially after the movie came out, and I attribute it to the film. But yeah, you know, it was kind of my way of being like, this is like my love letter to Stephen's career and persona, as it were.
Yeah, I thought it worked great. Also, I had no idea what I was walking into because they didn't say we're going to interview you for 4 hours. You know?
Really?
You know, they said we just want to do a little Q&A that we could use as kind of interstitial material in between acts or whatever it is. So, you know, David had like 1 billion questions, you know, kept asking questions, and it kept going and going and going till I was like, okay, I'll talk. It was me. I did it. And, but some interesting things came out that, you know, I couldn't plan on any of the questions. So in a way, David was right. He caught kind of the expository thing. You have the primary instinct is me working on a story, which is written and rehearsed. And then you have all these questions, which is not, you know, you know, totally like, whoa, okay, here we go. So then they get to see me, I guess, as I really am, and then the rehearsed piece, and then me as I really am.
And you obviously have a gift, but also maybe a need to tell stories. You know, they are holy to you. And I think I was, you know, when we started this podcast, how many years ago, I was really resistant to exposing myself, you know, the reality. I just wanted to talk movies. Let's just talk movies. But over time, it's become a much more personal experience. But it was very painful. Have you always been, you know, willing or wanting to give of yourself?
No.
It was painful to make it more personal than just movies. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was.
What about it was painful?
Because I didn't sign up to say how my job is destroying my soul. And you can't mention Barnes & Noble on this podcast because it was ruining me.
Yeah.
How long have you been podcasting?
2.5 years ago.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as you may know, I've been podcasting for like
time.
10 years, right? And I think over time, the set of things you can say about a film, it just becomes more and more challenging to be like super creative about how you talk about film. There's some people who are really, really good at it, who like, they've seen 10,000 films, and every review they write is like, wow, like new insights with new ways of describing that I couldn't have thought of. But like, I feel like those people there's not that many of those people. So if you're not one of the few, you're one of the many, then really the only thing you can do after a while, in my opinion, is like connect movies to your life and like how you're experiencing them and what you're getting out of them. And so for me, like on a long enough timeline, like most movie podcasts become personal.
And also, Brad is one of those people who has like an encyclopedic knowledge of movies.
Yeah.
And the other people on the podcast, there are actually 2 more of us. Like, our only way to speak about movies, especially me, because I was raised very conservative. So I wasn't allowed to watch a ton of movies until I got older. So the only way I speak about movies, or I speak about storytelling, or I speak about books, is I always relate them back to myself. Well, this is, you know, so like the way like I talk about movies, or Darren talks about movies, or Billy, or you know, Brian, we talk about them as how they relate to ourselves. And
so what you're saying is you beat me down.
Yeah, we did. We really did.
I remember I went to Sundance once, and it was like the 5th day or something, and a fellow critic came up to me, and I was like, how's it going? And he's like, oh, you know, I'm starting to like run out of like the movie language to talk about the movies.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying like that happens to everyone, but it's like, you know, you want to use like adjectives to
say
talk
so
about the
many
movie.
adjectives.
Yeah.
But there's only so many adjectives.
How many
you
times
can
can I write grotesque in a review?
right. And after a while, you start running out of the words. It starts becoming less, unique. So, relating it to your life, I think, is a great way to keep it fresh. But what were you going to say, Stephen? I interrupted you.
No. I had a totally different take on this. And that is, I noticed something. We have 2 kids. My wife, Ann, and I, we have 2 kids. And I noticed something really interesting, and that is she really began treating herself differently when she was pregnant. Her whole life has been devoted to taking care of other things, usually me. But when she was pregnant, she took care of herself because she wasn't. She was taking care of the child. And I think, in terms of the story, I think the permission I had is that I had certain stories that I had to take care of. That it was my responsibility to take care of. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have dealt with it. But the seminal moment for me was getting my neck broken in Iceland. And thinking like, well, what stories, my God, I could be dead. What story do I want my 2 kids to know about me? And that gave me permission for them to share things about my life so they would know about my first love, about all these things. David, I don't know if you know this story. I don't know if I told you this story. I was just doing a book event, I guess in May, at Powell's bookstore in Portland. And I'm doing, I think I'm doing the story that I'm doing here at the book event on Sunday at 5 o'clock at Alamo.
Right.
Yeah, here at Alamo. And as I'm doing the story, I'm looking out into the audience, and there's someone I know. Now, David knows from the podcast that I talk about a girl I fell in love with in 2nd grade, Claire Richards. Claire Richards, because she played the piano in her bluebird outfit with the hole in the back of her bluebird hat for her ponytail to go, and she was so good. And she'd play and that ponytail would fly, and I had the 2nd grade version of Heartthrob, and it's true. When you're 8 years old, it's true love. I mean, it's not love that you experience as an adult in a way, but it's real and it's true. And I'm looking in the audience and I see Claire Richards.
Holy shit.
But not Claire Richards as she would be now, a 67-year-old woman. I see Claire Richards as I knew her, as I would have known her in high school. And I'm looking, and I keep doing the story, and my eyes keep coming back to her, and I'm totally freaking out because it's her. It's her. And I'm feeling like I'm in the Twilight Zone. It ends, and she gets in line to get a book, and I'm doing the book signing, and I stand up and I say to her, I'm so sorry that I kept staring at you, but you look like someone I fell in love with. And she says, I am. She says, I'm Claire's daughter.
Whoa.
Oh my God.
She lived in Utah.
Oh my God.
She flew into Portland to visit friends, and on the TV saw that I'm going to be reading at Powell's Books, and she wanted to come and talk to me at Powell's Books to thank me for the stories about her mother.
Wow.
Saying that how much she learned about her mother from the stories that we did together, David, in the podcast. And I'm thinking like, so in a way, doing those stories for my kid gave me permission to do that story. And I actually did the story for Claire's daughter too, without knowing it. And I was protected by having permission for doing it for someone else.
That's unbelievable.
That's what
amazing.
comes from, see, like, I am developing this whole, like, Tobo life philosophy. Like, that's the kind of stuff that comes from living your life with clarity and going, like, I need to put this story out. The universe needs this story. And then the universe takes that story and gives it to whoever needs it. You know what I mean?
Now, this is why David Chen is who David Chen is. that involves so many things that we won't necessarily go to all of them right now, like the movie Clown, which I don't think you've really gotten all the adjectives for Clown.
I think
right.
that's Clown is a Draft House release. If
It
I'm not
is.
mistaken.
It is a draft house.
Wow.
This organization is responsible for. Basically,
They have some copies here.
if you have Clown Forever, I'm
No!
That's the new one.
How did they repackage? They just recently repackaged all the clown stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
It came
but
as-
yes, I'm
But
interested.
David, what I always tell my classes, like the comedy classes or improv classes I do, is the one thing you have to do in life is you have to do it. 95% of the people don't do it. They talk about doing it, they dream of doing it, they'll talk endlessly about their passion of doing it, but they won't lift their finger to do it. This guy does it, and he does it all the time and with so many different disciplines. I mean, he does it with podcasting, with his life, with photography, with directing, with the cello. He does it. Recording the cello, he does it. And that's it changes you by doing it. By doing it, it changes you. It also brings in the specter of failure. You can fail if you do it, which I guess is what people who don't do it are trying to protect themselves from. But you can't protect yourselves from failing, because not doing it is failing. It isn't not doing it. You will end up with that regret forever. And regrets don't go away. So I would argue to do it. And try to live your life more like David Chen, except with the possibility of picking different movies as your favorite movies.
So
Clown is great.
Did you tell them the backstory of the clown thing, or he came to visit? You know, Stephen comes in to visit Seattle pretty often, a few times a year, right?
Maybe 4 times.
Yeah, and so the one of the times he came over, I was like, "Hey, we should all watch this movie Clown together," which is, I want to say, Danish comedy
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
And we watched it with Stephen and his wife Anne. And there's a moment when the protagonist ejaculates on his mother-in-law's face.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just
That
one
was-
of those great
Yeah,
moments.
Yeah. Like you have happened.
Yeah, and
Classic Danish moment.
you know,
Get a penny for.
And that's just one of the brighter moments of the film. But we missed the part
So
about
Did you know what you were getting into when he sat you down to watch
No, I
Clown?
didn't
Did he
know.
pitch you at all what the movie was?
so ever since then, Stephen always like brings it up
Because he wants me
my
to watch
terrible
Clown too.
I
Yeah.
would have loved to have had that as a double feature this evening. The Stephen Tobolowsky, David Chen audio commentary.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
You know,
over that
it's-
film right there.
Yeah, there's
Next
some
time, David.
there's
Next time,
some
gotta go.
theatrical moments that you can't come back from.
But you'll always have clown though.
Yeah, we'll always.
We'll
have fun.
always have Clown, David.
Yeah, we'll
Always.
So, what, did you finish the movie?
Yeah, oh God, yes.
Okay, good.
Oh God, yes,
All right.
with the picture of the little boy's penis.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, got that in. That'll get you arrested in many states of the United States, David. Not in Denmark, where they're so advanced.
Well, you take risks when you share your love of movies.
Yes, that's correct.
I've read
Thank you.
two.
Thank you.
I've read 2 statistics on Denmark recently. One is that it is the best living environment. Like Denmark is the best place to live in the world.
With the
And
happiest people.
happiest people.
Yeah.
And the other is the highest rate of suicide and depression. So I'm going like, which is true? What was that thing I did with Stephen Merchant? On
Hello,
the boat?
ladies.
Yes, hello ladies, on the boat. I was a billionaire, and I was a billionaire on the boat, and had a series of women on there who I suspect were prostitutes, for real. I mean, I don't know. My apologies if any of you ladies are listening and you weren't. But when I said, well, are you actresses? And you go, no, I'm a dancer. Oh, really? Where do you dance? Well, I'm doing a tour of Asian nightclubs now. And I'm going like, oh, prostitute. Okay, I got it. But anyway, one of the people on the movie was from Denmark. And I was saying, like, are you happy in Denmark? I heard it's the happiest place to be. And she says, it is if you don't kill yourself. So I think that dichotomy,
Dichotomy, yes.
not dichotomy is represented by this one woman saying, yeah, if you don't kill yourself, it's a great place to live. But I called this one woman a prostitute as next because her voice was kind of like this, and she was a dancer from various nightclubs in Asia, where occasionally she would dance with very rich Asian gentlemen. And she was very angry with me. She was kind of brusque and standoffish, like sometimes a prostitute will be, until she saw this. And what I'm showing is the scar on my arm where I had my artery taken out of my arm to put in my heart. And she thought, since it's a vertical scar on my wrist, that it meant that I tried to kill myself. And the change in this woman, she looked at me and she goes, sweetheart. And she put her finger on the scar and she's running down the scar and says, what happened? Were you having a bad day? Were you having a bad day, dear? And I go, no, I had surgery, so it actually was a very good day. It saved my life. And she says, whatever, bless you. And it's like she totally turned on me. And then she was like the dearest, most sweetest, most, maternal sort of person, instead of having that harsh exterior. Again, my apologies if any of you weren't prostitutes. It seemed like the thing that they would do for that show.
So we're hitting the 45 mark. Do you want to? I think we should do what you were suggesting.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah.
So, look, we talked a lot about you as a character actor and getting to know your characters and the importance of that if you're going to represent something on screen. But a lot of what you're doing is you're bringing yourself to your stories, and you talk about clarity of living.
Always.
So we thought we might take a page out of James Lipton's Inside the Actor's Studio.
Oh no!
And have a bit of fun with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
To kind of get to know Stephen Tobolowsky.
So, what do you do? It's so hard for me to watch James Lipton because of his dyed hair. But how does it go? How does the speed thing go?
Well, so what I'm thinking is I'll ask you just some basic questions about who Stephen Tobolowsky is as a character, and whatever comes to the top of your head. You don't have to be in-depth answers. It can just be whatever comes off.
It'll be whatever is today. Okay.
So speed round.
So yeah.
Okay.
All right. So and you guys chime in with questions too if you want. It doesn't all have to be on me.
All right. It's gonna be all
Brad's
on him.
looking at me skeptically. All right. So let's start easy. Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Okay. Pie or cake?
Pie.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Neither now. I just lost my cat. You motherfucker. No,
Why'd you do that,
My
Billy?
cat just died.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Steve.
Oh no, I'm a basket case. We could talk about that forever. But I've lost the greatest dog, the pooch. The greatest cat, Belle. Next question.
Yikes. All right, well, let's follow that up. Let's see. If there was a zombie outbreak today, right now, where would you go first, and how would you make that decision?
Alamo Draft House, plenty of beer, and I could lock these doors and watch a movie.
Now the flip side of that is the only thing playing at the zombie apocalypse. And David Chen is here with us as well.
Yeah, but truthfully, I wouldn't leave the building. With a zombie apocalypse, you don't know where they are. I'm at the Draft House. It's a very secure building. A lot of films here, a lot of beer, and a lot of food behind the counter. I'm good.
All right, I like it. We'll put you on the spot. What would be a funny joke that you would tell to make people laugh?
I would probably tell the pig joke.
Which is?
Which is man sees a pig with a wooden leg running across the barn, and he couldn't believe it. And he watches the pig run back to the farm, and he asks the farmer, he goes, that pig had a wooden leg. He says, well, let me tell you a little something about that pig. We had a robbery over in this house the other day, and that pig came in, burst through the door, knocked the robber down, then with his nose dialed 911. It's an amazing pig. He goes, yeah, but the wooden leg, well, that ain't all that pig did. We had a fire in our barn. That pig opened the barn, got all the animals, opened the stalls, chased all the animals out in the field, probably saved our whole herd. He says, yeah, but the pig with the wooden leg had to have a wooden leg. Farmer says, well, a great pig like that, you don't eat all at once. Great pig like that, you don't eat all at once.
This is perfect. This is perfect.
Good.
All right. Some basic things. What's your favorite television program?
Right now has to be House Hunters International,
Okay.
or watching Beachfront Bargain Hunt, toggling with the Weather Channel to see who's going to be destroyed next.
Yeah,
Nice.
valid. So this one feels like a very actory-ish sort of interrogating their character kind of thing. But what type of birth did you have?
I had what type of birth?
I pulled this question from the internet, and I'm super interested to see how you interpret this question and where you go with it.
He was very
Is
young
this
at the time
Stanislaus?
of
Yeah.
his birth.
Well, okay. Literally, the first thing I would say is I was born at 2 a.m. at Methodist Hospital, but then I would say the second birth I had was when I saw Beth and fell in love. That was a whole different kind of birth. And then the next kind of birth I had was certainly the day that Anna and I got married and when we had our first child. That was a definite birth. Our first child being shot out of, it was amazing. And that was incredible. But then, probably when I broke my neck, that was another birth too. You notice how many terrible things have been birthed.
That makes sense. No. Let's see. What is your favorite food or drink when you're sick?
It has to be rye toast and chicken soup.
Okay. 100 years from now, if there was to be something named after you, say, in your hometown, what would you want it to be and why?
The Stephen Tobolowsky Theater at either Theater 3 or the Dallas Theater Center, that they would name one of their stages after me.
All right.
Without me contributing a lot of money to them.
What is your strongest olfactory memory from your childhood?
Olfactory memory.
It's the strongest smell that you can, when you think back to your childhood.
Yeah. Strongest smell. No question about it. My mother making cinnamon rolls on Wednesday morning. The Manor Man used to come. We used to have delivery people. He would bring cinnamon rolls and she would cook up cinnamon rolls Wednesday morning and we would all split them up. So the smell of that cinnamon and the melting icing will always be with me.
All right, so let's explore some emotions real quick. On just any given day, what makes you annoyed?
Oh, God.
Don't say podcasts.
Podcast interviews.
Traffic, the internet, and news.
What makes you happy?
My wife, my children, the flowers in my yard, my bees, my cats.
What makes you anxious?
News.
What makes you sad?
My cat.
Yes. What makes you grateful?
Everything I see.
What makes you laugh? Questions on podcasts.
Oh, God. Random memories make me laugh.
Yeah.
Often when I experience things in the present, I won't laugh at them, but when I think back, I'll go like, it'll really tickle me.
As a person, so overall, what are the types of things that make you angry?
I hate bullies. I hate meanness. I hate injustice. And there are all kinds of injustice everywhere. I'll tell you one thing where injustice lives and breathes is in academia. My own personal experience that I mentioned in the podcast with Joan Potter and in SMU and how horrible and unfair that was. But I experience it with my kids and I experience it with other people talking about the unfairness that they encountered at the hands of people in academia.
What makes you feel regret?
Some of the terrible mistakes I made in my life, either destroying love, doing obviously bad things to be a bad boy. David, I have a new podcast, which is, I think, going to be one of the best ones we've ever done, about the tendency to create mayhem in your life
Yeah.
And I think it's a genetic imperative to occasionally create mayhem, and I often look back at those moments with regret.
What makes you feel proud?
My stories that I did with David, the podcast. I feel very proud of the podcast. I feel very proud of the 2 books. Certainly Groundhog Day is proud. One Day at a Time, proud of that. Very much.
The Primary Instinct.
Oh, well, I count that as the stories.
Oh, okay.
But Primary Instinct, the stuff I did with David. He wants a double dip on my question. Yes, the podcast I did with David and the Primary Instinct I did with David.
What is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear. Oh, God. My biggest fear, boy, it's not death anymore, and it's not being injured anymore, and it's not being unemployed anymore, and it's probably, God, something happening to Anne or something horrible happening to my kids. That would have to be it.
What is your biggest hope?
Biggest hope. I see you're doing biggest hope, biggest fear thing that was from mine.
I saw that, watched it, I cried at the end, and
Yeah.
then I heard you say that, and I thought, geez,
Yeah.
those would be 2 great questions for a podcast.
My biggest hope is that I would have the energy to keep doing what I do and not start blowing stuff off. You know, of like just saying like of not researching the roles, of not thinking about the parts, of not writing the stories, of not doing it anymore. That would be my biggest fear, that I would not do it anymore.
And then we do a lot of interviews with people. I'd like to ask that question. Is that okay
Yeah,
with you guys?
please.
Yeah. So we do a lot of interviews with people, especially independent filmmakers. And one of the things that I think is the common denominator for all of those folks is that it's really hard to get your personal projects off the ground. It's really hard to make a movie. And it can at times make you feel quite lowly and like things are not working. So in your personal life, and David, I'd love to hear your answer for this as well. In your personal life, when you're having a crap day and things are not working for you, what is one moment that you look back to in your career that you sort of use as a buoy that says, this is what makes it all worth it to me?
It's interesting. 2 things. One, I think of when I was written off of the show on the Mindy project, and how brutal that was, and how badly that hurt for 2 weeks. And then I was okay. And I think one of the things about feeling lowly and feeling non-creative and that you're not appreciated and that you're cast aside is that you feel like it's forever, and it's not. It's 2 weeks, and then you get bored with it and you move on and you start doing more things. So knowing that there is a time limit to your misery is really important when I feel low. And another thing I found that helps me when I feel low is that what helps is if I immediately work on something else. If I feel lowly, like I can't write anymore, is to get into an acting project or do a research project, is to start working again, and you could dig your way out of your own grave.
I love it.
The summer movie wager.
I would say, for me, one of the things that keeps me going is, I recently appeared on one of my favorite podcasts called Film Spotting, and I shared some lessons I learned from podcasting. And one of the lessons is that something that you do may have much different meaning for yourself than other people. And people make podcasts, as you are doing. They make films. For Stephen, making a film is his job. You often don't even watch the movies that you make, right, Stephen?
That is correct.
Yeah.
I don't watch the movies and I don't watch the TV shows.
Yeah, it's just like showing up for a job. But some jobs have more meaning for other people than other jobs. And podcasts for some reason have a lot of meaning for people. They listen to podcasts when they're going through really challenging times in their life. They listen to podcasts to keep company. They listen to podcasts when they fall asleep, and we get emails every now and then saying "Hey, I almost died, and like, you know, while I was in the hospital bed recovering, listening to the podcast helped get me through it. And that's not what I set out to do. It was like, this is going to be the podcast to listen to while you're convalescing. You know, that's not what the goal was. The goal is just to create something engaging and interesting. And then for other people, it has like more meaning. And so like remembering that sometimes helps me to keep going.
Yeah. That makes me think of a story, something that I experienced. So I wrote a piece for Film School Rejects about The Fountain, the Darren Aronofsky movie. And I used it to kind of talk about life and death and the experience of that and how there's sort of a circle to life. And when I wrote about it, the first thing that I thought of that I was doing was just kind of speaking to this movie that maybe a lot of people find a bit impenetrable and sort of breaking that down in a way that makes them connect maybe to some of the things that Aronofsky was talking about in that. I mean, I thought it was cool and it was great, and it's like, oh, you know, it's nice to have your name out there, and that's kind of fun, and it's an interesting topic to discuss. I got a comment on that particular piece where a man, I may cry while I say this because it was very emotionally upsetting, but so a man talked about the experience of losing his wife to brain cancer right around the time that movie came out, and in dealing with the emotional repercussions of her death in his life, came to that movie and loved it. And what he said was, I had a lot of thoughts and emotions, obviously, in that time that I was going through, and I really couldn't put words to them. And when I read what you wrote there, it helped crystallize a lot of my thinking on that. And I just thought, whoa, just the ability for things to connect in different ways with people can be tremendously rewarding. So that's a bit me-centric story, but that kind of made me think of that. That's a good answer. I love it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with us. We certainly appreciate it. We admire you both tremendously. And we're really excited to watch The Primary Instinct here at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester.
Have you seen it yet?
Yes.
Yes.
We actually rewatched it this morning.
Oh, terrific.
Yes. Also cried doing that, so thank you.
Oh, yeah? You've never seen it
you've
before?
never
I'm
seen
a
it?
first timer tonight.
Whoa.
Nice.
You're going to love it.
I don't want to watch it at home. I'd rather watch it in an
Oh, it's
audience
great.
full
You'll
of
love it.
people.
You'll love it.
You'll love it. You'll love it. Yeah.
To make that experience an amazing experience.
So thank you. Where can we point people to online?
You can find me, David Chen, at davechen.net. And I have a newsletter now, davechen.net/letters, where you can subscribe.
Nice.
Ooh, I need to subscribe to that. I don't think I've subscribed to that. I'm at, you could do StephenTobolowsky.com, and it'll be one-stop shopping if you want to know where I'm going to be appearing or shows I'm on or podcasts that are coming out. And you have to spell my name correctly, which is STEPHENTO, B as in boy, OLOWSKY, the Russian spelling, .com. And you could go there and you'll find all sorts of stuff. Also, I'm on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
At Tobolowsky.
I've been tweeting with someone. So we have to.
and Facebook too, you know, Stephen Tobolowsky, yeah.
Well, thank you, sirs. We really appreciate it. And until next time.
Yay.
Yeah. And we're back.
Yeah.
How awesome
Holy crap.
was that? I was not lying in the intro. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you to Stephen Tobolowsky and Dave Chen for taking the time to chat with us. Incredibly generous with their time. I was really moved by that conversation.
Go.
Oh.
Lisa, you're
Oh
on
my
the
God.
spot.
Oh no. I love how all of our conversations tend to go to that place of, you know, like, just if you have a dream, just go do it, go live it, you know, and that never gets old, but then at the same time makes me sad. I have regrets.
No, we're doing it now, Lisa.
Okay, we're doing it now. Best life now.
Always best life now. No, I think that's a fun common denominator for a lot of these interviews. With the conversation with Don, with Stephen and David today, and all of the other filmmakers that we've had, especially for the Shallow Pocket Project, like all that stuff is just people talking about how important it is to do. You fail, that's fine. Failure's fine. Just keep doing.
How crazy surprised were you, Lisa, that the Penguins came up and your school pageants?
I know, it's so sad that too. I wanted to tell him, well, you know what happens to teachers who care? that much, they quit. They get emotionally exhausted and they peace out.
But I that was a really special moment. And yeah, so thank you, Lisa, for sharing that with all of us.
Also, if you want to hear some of my excerpts as Floozy number 3, you can ask me in person.
Nice.
I will do bits from that.
All right.
So yes, stay tuned to the Alamo Drafthouse Winchester. There are a lot of amazing events coming up. Of course, there is the Mads are back. They're coming to do their MST3K like event here during Psychorama. There's Psychorama itself occurring next weekend, starting on the 12th. And Jim Cummings, the director and writer of Thunder Road, is going to be back on the 14th, the same weekend as Psychorama.
Which, not for nothing, Thunder Road. Watch that, see Jim Cummings, then go see The Battery with Jeremy Gardner and Christian Stella, who, by the way, were the first interview for the Shallow Pocket Project.
Oh, cool. Who's hosting the Battery screening, Billy?
I am hosting the Battery screening, so that's why I'm hawking it. But you definitely should come out. The zombie movie's great.
And if you can't make it because you're nowhere near the East Coast, don't worry. We've got your back. We'll be talking about all those events here on It Modcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you did not get enough Tobolowsky, you can listen to another interview with him done in the same projection booth on the Say F It podcast.
That is true. All right. Lisa, where can we find you on the onlines?
You can find me at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd.
Billy, where can we find you on the onlines?
You can find me at WBDAS on Twitter and Instagram, where I currently sometimes Instagram.
When was the last time you Instagram, Billy?
Oh man, it was like 2 weeks ago. Wait,
It should
I'm
have
doing
been
it right
today.
I'm doing it right
Picks
now.
with Tobo.
Picks with Tobo is happening right now.
Nice. So go find that, listeners. And of course, follow the other dorks who couldn't be here today. Darren Smith at The Disco Dork on all social medias. Brian Young at The Turtle Dork. At least on Twitter. I can never remember what he is on Instagram and Facebook and all those other crazy places that he pops up at. And then, yeah, me. I'm Brad Gullickson, The Mouth Dork, at The Mouth Dork on all social medias. And until next time...